I'm going to give you a highly opinionated view of security, especially when it comes down to plugin recommendations and things to do. I've been doing security at the IT level as well as servers and WordPress for a number of years. So I'm only going to have a couple of recommendations for certain things. It doesn't mean that there's not going to be other options available. I'm actually not a big fan of adding plugins to a site, especially willy-nilly. So the ones that I will mention are going to be pretty judicious. You know, every plugin you add into WordPress just requires more resources, no matter what it is. It can be lightweight, but it still adds resources. So it's also going to be a pretty in-depth presentation. I hope I don't overwhelm you. It's going to be simple things will be touched on a few times over, and then it'll be more complex over time. I really do hope that you'll stick around, even if it goes over your head, because I'll throw in a couple of things later on that may be helpful, some resources or tools to use. And as Doug had said, raise your hand when there's questions. I have very specific times that are ideal for answering questions. But don't be concerned if it gets overhead here. So, you know, security has a lot of things, a lot of different levels. It's a doozy. It's not the most straightforward thing. It really isn't. You know, there's topics that people usually bring up as like, what plugin should I be using? And then, you know, what do I do if I've been hacked? And, you know, all these other types of things that just come up. And I want to make sure I cover the majority of it. And I think from a lot of these meetups, especially for people that are going to play this in the future, I want to cover some of the basics. So I'm going to go through terms, two-factor authentication, what it is, brute force, how people actually get in. And if you need me to elaborate on some of those items, again, just simply ask. Why is it important? I feel like I should be, that's a silly one. So security is one of these things that is ridiculously important on multiple levels, not only in the WordPress realm or internet realm. You know, SiteLock is a major security firm, and they recently said that every single small business website is attacked about 44 times per day. You know, that it's 152 million times a week of some type of attack. And it's one of those things we just, you know, you read in the news all the time. There was this whole big thing recently about Garmin having ransomware, where everybody who was wearing one of these Garmin watches or Garmin GPS got locked out. And a lot of these things are just active from hackers, and a lot of these things are just bots that are out there. And the important thing is just making sure that you know what you're getting into and what your level is. So let me tell you about who I am a little bit. I've been using computers for way too long. I think my bald head may show my age. I was very, very heavy on Macintosh, and today I'm primarily Linux and a little bit of Windows based. I still have a Macintosh. When I saw Macintosh back in 1984, I jumped right into it, and a number of people actually ran into software that I had participated in, most notably Stuff It. If there's any old-time Macintosh people here, you're probably like, oh yeah, God, I remember that. And I've since gone on to start a bunch of other companies, but WordPress is something that I visit every single day in some capacity. You know, I do a lot of IT work. I am strange in that I maintain my own servers. So a little bit later on in this presentation, I'll be getting into some of that, you know, more technical IT side of things. WordPress, secure, not secure? So WordPress itself gets hacked by people on a regular basis. Even, you know, it's an easy target. It is literally, you know what they say, I think it's 37% right now in August of 2020, 37% of all websites are running WordPress. And, you know, it's safe. It is secure inherently, but the fact of the matter is that whether it's secure or not really depends on you. I mean, it depends on the website owner, how far you take it. And security is risk reduction. It's not risk elimination. There's I'm of the belief that there's no perfect secure system out there. That's not hackable. I mean, maybe not hackable through technology, but maybe through social engineering, like we heard in the, that July 2020 Twitter attacks. That was mostly social engineering with people. So I think the key is just how far do you want to do it? How far do you want to take it? And whether you get into the aspect of I can only do so much. There's so much common sense that comes in with security, and I would suggest don't do this stuff just because other people are doing it. Just like, oh my God, I got to do this because everyone is saying I have to do this, because you may end up finding yourself into a position where it is it's untenable for you to maintain, and that could be trouble down the road. So hacks for websites specifically usually come down to very, very few things. You'll hear a lot of the technical terms. You'll hear about brute force, and you'll hear cross-site scripting and security headers and all this other stuff. But when you get right down to it, it comes down to problems with the software. And, that can be old versions of stuff. It could be third-party integration stuff that you're tying into. These brute force attacks and something also known as spray attacks are usually where people just are hammering onto a website and eventually they break through. Hopefully they don't. And then there's access control. You giving up your passwords. Administrators getting compromised. Something along those lines. And then social engineering, I briefly mentioned it. That's like what got Twitter just recently. Phishing attacks, by emails, people clicking on these links and getting sent to other places. Vishing is becoming quite popular nowadays with the COVID thing going on. Those are, where people are making voice phone calls to people and trying to trick you into things. But WordPress itself tends to have some very, very specific, what they call attack vectors or attack surfaces or places where people can get in. And I think that a lot of that comes down to how do you go about making sure that you minimize those attack vectors? There's a couple of them that really, really stand out. This is a slide from the folks over at Wordfence from early 2019. And I found this really fascinating that plugins were listed as #1 by far. You're talking about over half of the compromised WordPress sites that they obviously saw. And I don't know if you know, Wordfence has, I believe, around 30 million installations. So they're seeing a good portion of what's going on. So as you can see, right off the bat, right at the top, plugins and themes. When you add themes into it, these are two things that need to be updated frequently. It adds up, and then the core. So right off the bat, when you add these things into here, you're looking at almost 3/4 of all the attacks that will be levied onto WordPress are coming out from those particular items. So I'm breaking this presentation down into a number of different levels. I'll have basic and then some more advanced, and then eventually we'll start getting into college level and master's and doctorate level and see how far we can actually take it here. So let me just go through the basics. And I think a lot of you probably heard these things before, but it's never a bad thing to hear them again. And one of the big things is you can never have enough backups. And older backups as well. Just don't necessarily feel that your backup, just because you have a current one, does not necessarily mean the end-all be-all. It could easily be that your site was quote-unquote hacked months ago, and it's been sitting dormant, this little malware, and you may have to go back to what was a couple of months ago. And a good host should keep backups for you, but make sure that you download them. It's worthwhile to keep your own. WordPress themes, plugins up to date. That's a doozy. That is, I have that on the vast majority of my clients. When I sign into their websites and I see this big, the big red orange number that's hovering there, and I just shudder to think, oh my gosh, has somebody already compromised this? And a lot of them just also leave plugins, they detach them and they just leave them sit there, and Sometimes they don't even update them. They're like, oh, it's not turned on, but why should I bother updating? Strong passwords. I just pray that everybody's using strong passwords. And by the way, strong passwords statistically are better the longer they are. You don't necessarily have to have a lot of complexity, numbers, symbols, all these other things, but the longer a password is, the less likely it is to be able to be attacked. And definitely, you know, have everybody that you know also. Don't use the basic passwords. Don't use the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Don't use the word password. Or now people are like, okay, so I shouldn't use the word password, so I'm going to put an exclamation point and the number 1 at the end of it. So it's password, you know. And yeah, I think that's also one of those things, just not for you, but as many people as I can possibly educate on passwords. I just do it all the time. And there's, by the way, I don't know if everybody heard of something called Password Day. I think it's the beginning of May. Kind of like this annual little event that comes up in my calendar and says, all right, time to change passwords. I do it on computers as well. My wife does it. You know, my mom and dad will do it as well. Two-factor authentication. I'll touch on that in great detail in a little bit. That is the where you're relying on not only your password, which you know, you will always have for everything, but also on something that you have in your possession, that you prove to the system that it's not just the password that you have, it's something that you actually physically have, like a cell phone. Yeah, and this last one that's on this slide here, make sure your site's in SSL. It used to be such an old thing to say, you know, you always have to have SSL. I think that nowadays, if you do not have a host that automatically provides SSL certificates, TLS certificates, and provides them for free, something is wrong. You don't have a good web host. And you may want to start looking for others. Now, that does not necessarily mean that you don't have issues with what's called mixed content. You may still have some images or some other items that are on your site that will have the SSL not showing up properly, but that's slightly a different thing. Just make sure you have that base certificate. And try not to use a functionality to get that. You know, don't use a plugin to get that kind of functionality. The earlier you start your website security, the better off you are. It's a building block. And I can go on and on and on about website hosts. Cheap, I want to point out, cheap does not mean crappy. I wouldn't necessarily recommend the $2.95 plan to sign on, but you need to have a general sense where your responsibilities are, where their responsibilities are, where it begins, where it ends. Good hosts should have their own security. They should keep stable versions of software. They should be backing up for you on a regular basis. They should tell you, ideally, what they do for free when you look at their sites. You know, what they charge for, same way. And also some great, you know, there's a couple of great hosts that are out there that actually say exactly what they will do for security. Do I need to talk about pirated plugins? Don't use them. Don't use them. I've actually seen one being used in the past 2 months. I can't believe, you know, Elementor Pro is not that ridiculously expensive. Don't go to a free website and download Elementor Pro. It's you don't know what you're getting. And I briefly said this also. How much time and effort do you want to put into this? You know, you can only go so far, and sometimes you do some of these basics here, and you've accomplished a huge portion of it. You know, having backups, updating WordPress and themes, and plugins, having two-factor authentication, and you've remediated easily a good huge portion of it. So this idea of updating things is going to become easier in about 2 weeks' time. On August 11th, 2020, what they're expecting to ship version 5.5 of WordPress, and later versions will also have an auto-updating feature. And that auto-updating feature is not going to be as simple as, wow, my WordPress has it, and now I'm all safe. It does require a little bit of an extra step for you to go in and to actually say, these are the plugins that I want updated. So it is very, very easy to update WordPress themes and plugins. I would suggest that you go back to that whole idea about having a backup first before you do your updates. There are some people that use a plugin called WP Rollback. I personally, I love making sure that I will update as many plugins and WordPress itself on staging sites, on development sites, seeing if it works well, especially some of the commerce sites that I work on. You know, I'll visit, do a little visual regression and visit the pages, make sure they look good, fill in a form, try to make a purchase, and then I'll do it on the live site. Just gives you an extra little point of safety on it. So, did I mention backups? Yeah, I'm gonna backups, yeah. All right, two-factor authentication. A lot of people are actually using this right now, but I think a lot of people don't really know what it is and how it gets implemented onto WordPress. It is a mechanism to stop easy sign-ins to your backend. Now, if you have people who are buying through WooCommerce or Easy Digital Downloads, sometimes they will have access to your backend, but you may not want to have that two-factor authentication turned on for everybody. I would suggest that if you're starting with two-factor authentication, that you definitely do that. Essentially, it's an additional login feature. It is where it relies on something that you know together with something that is in your possession. So this something that you know is your password, your username and password. Something in your possession would be a mobile phone as an example. I think a lot of people have seen it in banks. You know, before you sign on to a bank, you have to enter your username, enter your password. It says, we're going to send you a limited time code to your mobile phone. Please enter this item. That's a two-factor authentication. Anytime you use something that has multiple factors, not just two, but multiple factor authentication, because there's other ways of doing this, you'll be way ahead of the game. You're going to do an easy job of keeping what are mostly humans off of your site with ease, and a lot of the bots that are out there won't be able to get through to those backends through your backend. They may be able to do it through a plugin that is dangerous, but otherwise it's not going to be something that they're going to be able to get into easily. A couple months ago, March 2020, Microsoft publicly stated at the RSA Security Conference that the number they used was 99.97% of their customers that got compromised were not using multi-factor authentication. So to give you an idea, that is a crazy, I mean, listen, they're hosting, I think, in upwards of 30 billion accounts. They have a huge number of accounts. So these numbers, you know, when you hear that in 1 month they had, you know, 1.2 million accounts compromised. Oh my God, 1.2 million accounts compromised. That's just because of the sheer number of things they have. But the thing is that 99.97%, according to them, in March of 2020, were compromised by people who did not have multi-factor authentication. I think that's such a huge, huge argument for it. Setting it up is not always the easiest thing. And that, I think, is what keeps people away from it. It does take multiple steps to get it installed. It's not just the getting the plugin onto the website and configuring it. You do have to have a two-factor authentication application running. You then have to go through the process of entering a username and password, verifying it. And then ideally, you should do a log out and log back in. A lot of these two-factor authentication systems have backup codes because you want to be able to utilize them just in case for some reason you don't have those at hand. And two-factor authentication is a free process. You do not have to pay for a WordPress security plugin to allow this to happen. These on the screen here are just a handful of the free options that are there. And there are more. These are the three that I have actually personally used. I want to point out that the first one, the one that's called by plugin contributors, does also allow for two-factor authentication via SMS text messages, as well as for emails. So it's a nice little thing where you go to sign on, you enter your username and password, it says, please check your email box. Not every plugin will do that for you. The one that's listed here third, that Wordfence login security, that is not the Wordfence primary plugin. That is a very specific, free, with minimal ads, I might add, plugin that the Wordfence people supply that only does two-factor authentication. And these three things should be, these are, I call these minimal viable plugins. If you're not doing two-factor authentication just to get started with, then you're probably, yeah, and other plugins do this. It's not just these, but these I just want to present the free options. So, basics. Covered some of the basics. How about questions so far?
So our first question's from Dean.
Hey, good evening. Thanks, David. And thanks for Stuff It. Used to love that. Hey, on two-factor authentication, I mean, I understand the mechanics of it and how important it is. But yet, for those of us that are always into the same website, it's a pain in the neck too, because it's one more thing to keep track of and to enter and to have to go pull up your phone when you just want to use your keys, you know, keyboard and stuff. So is there maybe an equivalent sort of a plugin or ability or an approach that might be IP based if you are at home or at the office having a fixed IP, and you can use that to at least provide one channel into your website that is that's not quite so cumbersome to get to?
Yeah, good question. I will actually touch a little bit more on that allow list and deny list for IPs. That is something that most people with most web hosts can actually implement themselves. The key with that, for people that don't understand what this means, an IP address is the address of usually one internet connection at a home, sometimes multiple computers at a business. And it signifies the access that can or cannot be provided through to a website. You can actually allow or deny IP access to servers as well as to WordPress itself. Another option to potentially use is something called basic auth, B-A-S-I-C-A-U-T-H. Some people call it HT password. And that's what I actually use. And what that does, it takes a little bit of a setup, not that hard. And what that actually does is that will put in a special additional username and password in front of your backend, where people will not have any access to it, period. It's actually one of the harder things to attack. It was vulnerable a number of years ago, but it's very, very difficult to get through. So I think those two items are safe. On the first one, I just hope your IP doesn't change, right? If you're on certain internet providers, that will change your IP address. And there's a number of internet providers, even in, in and outside of the United States, that provide what are called dynamic IPs, where you may never know what your IP is at any time. You may have to be a little knowledgeable about the former.
Yeah, but even just for what it's worth, if the IP is changing and most people at home do not have a static IP, it changes infrequently. And so that would be like doing two-factor authentication once a month or once every 6 months or something. So yeah, but thanks, appreciate it. Yeah,
no problem. I have, for what it's worth, I don't know why, but every time I unplug my Comcast net connection, I get a new IP address. I'm not complaining, but I just, Comcast likes that, I guess.
All right. Our next question comes from Doug Noyle.
Hey guys, hope you're all having fun. David, thanks for doing this. Nice to hear your voice again. With regards to two-factor authentication, you touched on Wordfence's focused plugin for 2FA. Are you suggesting that that is a better solution than the 2FA that comes in their free security plugin?
Good question. I think that no matter what, you do want to have something that provides two-factor authentication. If a lot of people who put that Wordfence, the primary Wordfence plugin, and install it, actually don't configure its most valuable feature, which is the firewall. You have to take extra steps to configure the firewall. And so I don't think there's a downside necessarily to using it other than the heftiness that you may have. I have suggestions for people that use Wordfence, like turn off the logging of everything. There are other things you can do, but I think my main point here is use some type of two-factor authentication. For a long, long time, I think you were using iTheme Security as well as I was, and that provided two-factor authentication. But there was a certain heaviness that came with that.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Okay, our next question is from Lee Yang.
This is actually Marcus in the same room. So I had a question. We recently did a new setup, and one of the plugins that came installed by default was Loginizer. And I understand that in their Pro version, they include two-factor authentication. Would that be worth considering as an option in your opinion, like combined with the other login security that they offer?
No, I did not catch the name of that particular plugin.
It's Loginizer.
Oh, Loginizer, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, there's no reason not to use it. I wouldn't use multiple ones. That's something you would want to stay away from. So for example, if you did have Wordfence at some point installed, or security installed, or WebArcs, or fill in the name of another one, just make sure you're only using one two-factor authentication functionality.
Thanks.
This is Lee. I have a additional question. So it's on WordPress, they suggested to have the child theme, and when you build up the website, I'm wondering. And currently we have a staging, staging for the WordPress. Then we still need the child theme to prevent when the theme is upgraded, and then we lost the original it's a customized theme.
I am unsure if I understood your question there.
I'm just wondering, it's currently it's have the child theme, and also we have the staging like website.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, current website. I'm just wondering is if we have the staging, do we need have the child theme? And yeah, when you launch when the theme is upgrade, and when we purchase the theme, and when it automatically upgrade, if it's we have the staging website, can we just don't build the child, don't need the child theme?
I think that by far you want to keep as much parity as possible between any type of local development you might do and your staging site and your live site. So if for some reason you have a child theme that is on your that's different on your development site, that's on your live site, you're going to want to make sure that they have parity, right? They're the same things at some point.
Yeah.
Child themes inherently need a manual update by you. It's the primary themes that will often be updated by the providers.
Yeah,
it's a real bummer, by the way. It's a real bummer when you don't have the parity, meaning that it's not the same thing on your staging site versus your live site. And then going backwards also, if you want to take your live site, move it to staging, you just want to make sure that it is as picture perfect as the main site. Sometimes that even includes the amount of disk space or amount of memory that WordPress is giving, and things like that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Okay, is there anyone else with questions? All right, I think you're good to go.
Excellent. Brute force attacks. We hear them all the time. I'm not sure if people understand them, and also what is coming. What's now popular is a lot of what are called spray attacks are becoming more and more popular. So the idea of a brute force attack against a server and or against a WordPress site is essentially a trial and error method where password and user combinations are just done over and over and over and over and over until one is successful. And when that one is successful, it gets in. They're almost always coming from automated tools, botnets. They're usually not coming from people. But there have been brute force attacks that have been levied by actual people. These automated tools that people are using, they just have these massive lists of usernames and passwords. And it says, it says here that they're random usernames and passwords. It's not random. For the most part, people know that. On some site that I've had in the past, one of my usernames probably had the word David in it. All right, now there are already 5 letters into my username. That's not a random thing. That's something that somebody can figure out. Now, what about, do I have an administrator account? Do I have one called admin? Do I have one called test admin? Do I have, these types of usernames? And then passwords. There's a long list of frequently used passwords that are readily available. I believe that there's actually a list that's 37 million usernames and username and passwords that are readily out there, and people have sorted them out and know which ones to actually plug into their bots and control. So brute force attacks are not just against WordPress. I think I mentioned they're also against servers, but a lot of people don't recognize as well that brute force attacks can be against your host control panel login. It doesn't have to be against the actual server itself. It can be attacking your other logins that you have. If you are using my PHP admin for looking at your database, and if it has a separate login, then that is another attack vector for doing this. And I mentioned spray attacks. It's not on this slide here. Spray attack, in case people don't know, it is where these bots will hit a lot of websites, one after another, using very few commonly used passwords. So they will look at a particular shared hosting server. They'll see on this particular host, there's 70 particular websites that are on this one small server. And what they'll do is they'll just spray the exact same username and spray the exact same password and hope that one of them will hit one of those 70. And you don't actually see these attacks coming through because you only get hit once or twice with these things. They're not really brute force attempts, but close enough. Very, very common. And Microsoft announced that the vast majority of their compromises, which I would imagine is true for Amazon and Google as well, Apple, are spray attacks. Backups. I feel like this is going to become a running joke here. I'm going to keep on talking about backups over and over and over. Restoring backups. Let's touch on this for a second. I don't know. Yeah, I've been paying close attention to security for a long time, and just a few weeks ago, in July 2020, Garmin was seriously attacked, and they had what's called ransomware, where they actually compromised their keys and not exaggerating, shut down over 4,000 servers and 56,000 workstations were all locked out. And it ends up that their backups were not easy to come by. And it's questionable whether they actually paid somebody to actually do that. The ransomware people asked for $10 million, and I personally wouldn't be surprised if a security firm in the Seychelles or the Bahamas that was under the employ of Garmin actually probably put forth that money, because it got restored very, very quickly. Processes can take a long, long time to restore. Big companies, I think was it 2017 Maersk, the huge shipping company. You see a lot of those huge container ships that are out there. They got hit massively, brought down also for them tens of thousands of servers and hundreds of thousands of workstations. It ends up that no one there had actually tried to test their ability to restore any of their backups. They had backups, not at every level within the company. These are distributed companies, but the core backups, no one actually tried to see if that would actually work. So this third item down there, at some point, check to make sure that your actual backup is able to be restored. I would easily argue that the restore is more important than the actual backup itself. And there's a 3-2-1 rule of backups. It's been around for decades. 3 different versions or copies of your data, having them on 2 different forms of media. It can be one that you download on your computer, another one you put onto Time Machine, on a remote drive, onto a network attached storage, and one of them is offsite. I personally do computer backups onto external drives, and I send them to my brother, and he does the same. So I know that in the event of an earthquake here in the Pacific Northwest United States, my dad will be, I was about to say safe. No, he's in San Jose, California. It won't be safe there either. But at least it's offsite, right? It's somewhere else. So yeah, backups. All right, so WordPress now has this thing. It was provided for a while in a plugin, and it is now a built-in. It is something that you can find easily in a dashboard by default, in your main WordPress dashboard. But if you don't see it in your dashboard for whatever reason, you go to Tools and then Site Health. And it lists a number of things there, mostly performance issues, but it also does some security things. And actually, I think there's even a crossover on some of these being both performance and security. PHP warnings, for example, older versions of PHP, like for example, PHP version 5.6, which is commonly deployed still to this day on a lot of websites. It is not only non-performant, but it does have security issues. So it's a combination. But when you actually go into this health feature, you can actually run it, and it'll do a reasonable job of keeping what I probably call the continuation of 101 for the basics of knowing how your particular site is running. The one thing on here that I would always want to make sure that anybody ever sees it, where you see anything that says potentially public files, if you see that warning, pay attention to that one. Sometimes it may be simple files that are exposed that are no big deal, like readmes, and sometimes it could be bad configurations. All right, so there are the basics. Let's go up a step. Plugin use. I told you how much I try to keep minimum plugins. Keeping minimal plugins not only is a good best practice just from a coding standpoint and functionality standpoint, but it provides also a level of less attack vectors. Every single plugin that's out there has administrator access. So since most of the WordPress hacks involve the plugin, keeping the fewer is the better. Usernames, these are attack names all the time. Changing these, especially that test admin one, may be a little touchy on some hosts. There are some web hosts that provide one-click login. You actually go into their control panel and you say, click the button that says, log into my site. And a number of them are actually dependent on one of these usernames being there. If it does require one of these usernames, it may be time to find a new host. Cloudflare or True Firewall. I'll touch on that a little bit later on, but these are actually things that will, Cloudflare is a reverse proxy. It kind of hides things from you and provides a little bit of firewall protection at the same time. And then a firewall just keeps things away. Expired and premium plugins, oh my gosh. Okay, so if you've been using a premium plugin, a paid plugin or a theme, and you are no longer paying that annual fee, they will quite often not only not auto update, but they will also show up as being up to date in your system. Sometimes the functionality is still there. You'll be using it. You'll say, why do I have to pay for the upgrades? Well, you never know necessarily that they did a security fix. You are not subscribed to that service any longer. And next thing you know, you do have a hole in there. So pay a little bit of extra attention to those types of plugins. And this whole thing about mixed content warnings, this is that, you have on top of, in your address bar in a browser, it will actually tell you that you're not secure. Every single browser nowadays does that. It's kind of like a basic thing. More beyond the basics. Password keepers. 1Password. LastPass is popular. Bitwarden If you don't trust others to host, you can actually host your own Bitwarden. The nice thing about using password keepers is it encourages you to keep better passwords. They will generate passwords for you. They will save passwords for you. They can do long ones and complex ones. And the other thing about them is that you don't have to remember a whole bunch of passwords or new patterns. Sometimes it's the patterns that will get to you. If you have a particular password that is such as medium box, over time you might be tempted to change that password to medium dash box, and then it becomes medium dash box 1. And next thing you know, you're like, oh, I know that password, so now let me go onto my bank, and when I set up a new account over there, I'm going to make it medium box exclamation point 2. And sadly, if one of those gets compromised, it's a house of cards potentially. Software I briefly mentioned is out there. A lot of it is pirated. They called it nulled. Getting stuff off of the WordPress repository is considered to be safe. There's so many reputable developers out there. Look for highly rated theme forest stuff if you need to. If you happen to see any type of thing that is too good to be true, you know, not necessarily a sale from the actual provider, but like, wait, this does not look like the actual true Astra Pro, then, you know, stay away. Limiting access. If someone else is going to maintain your site for you, create a new user. Don't give them your password. Limit their access. It gives you an ability down the road to actually cut it off. Every time I sign on with somebody new and I start working with them, I always feel, and I think I get the impression that they're always a little weirded out when I'm like, okay, before I get in there, make a backup and set up a new user and give me a password just in case you need to cut me down the road. And I'm just wondering if, what are they thinking? This is just good security practices. I can't mention backups. Did I mention backups? And another beyond the basic thing, not that hard to do actually, is to limit failed attempts. This is that brute force type of thing. It ideally should be dealt with by your host or cloud firewall or other types of remediation, but you can be done with the plugin. Yeah, easily can be done with the plugin. So moving up a level, a little bit beyond the basics things. I hope that everybody catches it. I'm gonna, while you guys are raising your hands for questions, I'm just gonna go back to these slides so you can see what they were.
All right, Doug Noyle is first.
Hey, what did you say about theme forest? I didn't catch that.
I was saying that theme forest, I would consider that the vast majority of the stuff that's there is a trusted source. I often tell people only take plugins from reputable developers and from the WordPress repository, but people who are on and evaluated decently by you on theme forest, I would consider that to be a trusted source.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Alicia is next.
Hello, this is really fascinating. One of the things that perturbs me about WordPress is if you haven't put your, if you haven't put your name, your first and last name in, and you write a blog post, it's authored with your user ID. And the whole world can see half of your login. Is there a way to have that not be default or something, or say you can't publish this post until you give us a real name?
All right, I'm going to give you a little bit of a long answer for that, okay? There is a safety into making sure that you do not use your administrator login whenever possible. There's a strong wisdom into having a clean administrator account and then creating an editor account or a contributor account or author account for you and logging in that way. That's one thing. There is, throughout WordPress, even stuff that may not be exposed publicly, an ability to it's called user enumeration. You can actually walk through a website and start seeing what people authored what pages. And quite often you can actually see, oh, this is user number 2, this is user number 3, this is user, and their name as well. And I don't think it's thinking that far out to be able to say, well, if this particular person's name is Patrick Moves, that maybe his username is Patrick M or P Moves. And that makes it a little bit easier for these bots to be able to get in through that user enumeration. It is possible to do things to stop user enumeration.
Okay.
Boy, that was one long ass answer.
Okay, I just want to make sure. I just want to make sure I got that was clear. What
Yeah.
I'm seeing is the user ID, not the person's name. I'm seeing actually user ID as their author on the publicly facing.
Yeah, that depends on how the site is actually configured and how it's displaying.
Okay, and so what I'm finding is that if the author didn't go into their user profile and actually put their first and last name in those fields, they will always get their user ID used as default. And I just think that's like really silly WordPress to not actually have a safeguard for that.
Yeah, I have not seen anywhere that anything that I have run into plugin wise that forced you to have that information in a regular user account. Most e-commerce solutions, in particular WooCommerce, Easy Digital Downloads, they do force the users to have a certain number of names in their system that comes over to WordPress.
Okay, all right.
Maybe you should write a plugin.
Out of time.
If I could just add something, when you edit a user, there's an option, display, I think it's display name publicly as, or nickname or something like that, where you can change, so by default, I think it depends on your theme, but it'll try to use the first and last name. If there's nothing there, then
that's what I was talking
yeah.
about. Those fields are blank until you actually put your first and last name in it, and most people don't.
Yeah. So if that doesn't exist, then it'll try to use the username because there's no other thing to use. But if you don't want to use either of those, you can actually put a custom name in there.
Like that.
It's if you just edit your user account, you should see there's like a drop down.
I've seen that.
You can change it. Yeah, so it depends on your theme, but I think most decent themes will use that nickname or whatever it's called.
As long as you remember to do it.
Yeah.
That's the point. It's like most people don't. So. Yeah.
So what I have, some of my clients actually, they want it to appear as by administrator, but I don't want them to have administrator as the username. So we use that as the nickname. So, they can put their first and last name, or, they can use a different actual username, but it shows up as administrator.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so our next question is from Larry.
Yeah, you're probably going to get to this, but haven't yet. So I'm a little surprised, and I'm going to ask a question. Security plugins, and which one you recommend, and preferably free. I know there's at least 3 kind of big ones out there, and in particular, I'm interested in limiting logins. But for just as a basic security plugin, what do you recommend?
So I will get to that. I may sound a little schizophrenic when I get closer to that because I don't have one clear recommendation. It's, for me, WordPress security plugins are not an easy one-fits-all type of approach, especially on the free side. So in a little bit, I have a couple of slides in there that will talk about the features that are available. And I can speak a little authoritatively towards which plugins have those features, but I've only seen one clear premium plugin that has almost all the features, and then and another one that has the vast majority. But those sadly are paid. So ask again if I don't answer the question in a little while. Okay.
All right. Thanks.
All right. No problem.
Okay, and then we've got Rob Tanner.
I have this feeling it's something you're going to cover in a few minutes or 20 minutes or whatever. Anyway, I originally was running a site for a religious group, and I've had Wordfence to provide security. And I've recently taken on another client, and the previous administrator there is arguing that they preferred Security. He said they used Wordfence before, and it loaded the site down, and they had compromises from it, and I think it was misconfigured Wordbench. I can't get the word right. Wordfence, excuse me. Sorry about that tongue twister.
Oh yeah, it is.
Can you speak between the difference between Security and Wordfence?
In their free versions, I would say that Wordfence is a little bit better. In its paid version, I would say Security is a little bit better, mostly because they provide a better reverse proxy firewall that they have. So, it's also one of these. It's hard to know what features they're looking for. There's also this whole idea about just appeasing the boss with one. It sounds terrible, but if they want to run this particular plugin, if it's the free one, then their feature sets are so close that it may not be problematic.
Yeah, because one thing I like about Wordfence, excuse me, getting that right, is it will scan my site and tell me issues that Security does not, as far as I can see, do.
Actually, Security, that's one of the most common. Security does do that, and as a matter of fact, a number of other security plugins that are out there actually use the Security scanning functionality. I'm of the belief that also in the very early days, Wordfence even used a variant of the Security scanning. I could be wrong on that, but
okay.
Mm-hmm. I would trust them both for scanning, no question about it.
Because my impression was that Security was mostly based on a server on the network somewhere rather than on your host.
Correct. Yes, even in their free version, but their premium version is almost all about the cloud, and there are some advantages to doing that. No question about it. That's one of the reasons I said in their. That's why I was briefly saying in the paid version. I would probably say Security is a little bit better on that end of things.
Okay.
The protection that protection will happen in the cloud before it happens near your WordPress site.
Because I like the fact that Wordfence, I'm deliberate there so I don't say it wrong. A Wordfence would let me know I have misconfigured PHP files and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
That I don't here I can find.
I know exactly what you're talking about there. Yeah. Again, that's that free versus paid thing,
Okay. All right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for coming.
Sure.
All right. Are we ready for more brains to start hurting?
I think that's all. So Larry, I think your hand is still up from before, unless you have a new question. Okay. All right, you're good to go, David.
All right. SSL, mixed content, for people that are not familiar with it, is that little green lock icon that will appear on browsers. Since 2018, all these browsers are now actually going out of their way to say you're not protected. The bummer is that you may find that this thing called mixed content, where you just have some old data quite often that's only using HTTP:// not HTTPS. That sometimes can just throw a wrench into it, and then you start having that lock icon not showing up properly. There are scanners that are available to be able to find that. There's also plugins that are out there that will fix, quote unquote, fix this for you. I do not recommend using them long term. I think it's much better that you actually find where the problems are and fix them. If for some reason these things are not obvious to be fixed, show up at one of the help desks that are out there online, and other people may be able to find it for you and give you a really good idea for where to go. It may just be in your database that somebody's going to have to crawl into to try to fix that. I think to a large extent that patch that you will do via a plugin it helps, but it's not necessarily the ideal solution. So we were briefly touching on this whole idea about how to get the good plugins, and I mentioned Theme Forest and WordPress Repository, but how do you find the right ones? I mean, like, what does it come down to actually doing this? On the right-hand side of this slide here, I have here just some of the most common things that I look for. When was it updated? How often is it being updated? Also, I've seen sometimes where the update was 3 weeks ago, but it was not updated for the past 9 months. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Did it need to be updated? Possibly, or was there a need for a patch? Just was there a frequency issue? Quite often when you go into the WordPress repository, it may say to you that this plugin, this theme, was not verified with the most recent version of WordPress. That's not always problematic because quite often WordPress has features, security features that will update itself. So when you see somebody tested with 5.4 and then next thing you know it's 5.4.1 and then 5.4.2, they may have only tested with one older version. Looking at the ratings and understanding the ratings, not playing this what I call the Amazon.com game, you know, like you read the 5-star reviews, you read the 1-star reviews, and then you're good to go, kind of thing. It's like you know how it's like sometimes, wait, it's all 5 stars. It doesn't seem possible. Is that right? Kind of thing. But question why that may be. Maybe they really do have something really, really good behind them there, and maybe when you start reading those 2-star reviews, you start finding out that the people who are complaining about it have other reasons they're complaining about it. And, you know, is the author out there answering questions about it when those things come up? That's another big thing. Sheer number of installations goes a long way. However, quite often it is not showing you the most recent things. There's a plugin that I will sometimes use called PPP, a profiler plugin that has not been updated in, I'm going to guess, 7 years. Number of installations show an old number, and it still does things that I occasionally needed to do. So number of installations are old. It's not true and correct. And you know what's not on here also is the person who's writing this. Do they even have a privacy policy on their own website? Do they state terms of service at all? It kind of ups the game if you start seeing people who pay attention to, oh, better yet, you know, do they have on their website a physical address in their terms of service, you know? You know, when you get to their contact pages, they're, you know, having an address actually lends credibility to a WordPress plugin. And the same kind of things go, this is just when checking the repository, similar types of things you want to employ with premium plugins and premium themes. It's a good thing to start doing those things. So, all right, moving up. 301. Hope everyone's doing well here. Getting better. 2-factor authentication, quite often limited by bosses, by customers. It's too hard to do. It's really in my way. It's a pain for everybody to use it. At the least, if you can't convince somebody else that it's a great thing, at the least enforce it for administrators. If it's a pain in the butt for regular users, enforce it for all the administrators. Administrator accounts, I mentioned briefly, a little bit harder to guess. I don't want to have an administrator account that has the word David in it. That's not going to be helpful. My last name's not going to be helpful. This principle of least privilege, if you haven't heard this before, not everybody needs administrator privileges. That's a common thing for people that are new to WordPress. Oh, I have somebody who's going to work on my website. They're only going to be doing blog posts, but what the heck? I'll just give them administrator access because that's what I have. And the principle of least privilege is just, you know, not everybody needs to have these privileges. Just give somebody the least possible user role, the least possible privilege that you can do. And I also put in here this idea of creating a new administrator, disabling the other one. That's so if people who do bots that do this looking for user number one, if it's not set up, or what Alicia was talking about potentially with user numbers, user number one is really easy to go after. And quite often it has the username at some point of administrator, and easy to get through. There's also outside of the regular plugin aspect, you know, when you go and you look at installed plugins, at the very, very top, you'll see where it'll say all plugins, active plugins, disabled plugins, and then it says drop-in plugins and must-use plugins. It is worthwhile for you to check in with what those are and consider whether they need to be there, why they are there, and if quite often those will be updated by your host. It is also an issue with these must-use plugins and drop-in plugins that if you move from one web host to another, a lot of this migration software will automatically bring over those plugins. And you will actually find that you are on Bluehost and it was running this Endurance page cache, and you installed it on GridPane, and next thing you know, my site's not up. And it was because this little hidden drop-in plugin that GoDaddy put in there, and it's, yeah, so pay attention to those. Refine those a little bit there. Keeping two-factor authentication codes away from your password keeper. For a long time, I was using my own password keeper, and I would start like using LastPass, and I would all of a sudden scan my two-factor authentication codes into this, and it was pointed out by somebody who I really trust for security that that is how he lost Bitcoin. Somebody actually got a hold of his 1Password. They got into his account. They went through a two-factor authentication because they had everything, and that was it. He lost tens of thousands of dollars. And what he started doing, because now all of a sudden he's super paranoid that he kept everything in one bucket, he actually started using a cheapo, disconnected from the cloud phone in his pocket. That's how paranoid he has since become. However, it's actually a really good practice. It's called air-gapped. You don't have to go that far, but keeping it out of your main password keeper has a victory there. Allow lists. We were talking before about that with the IP addresses, having them on these IPs are the only ones that are allowed to get in. Something that I've gotten bitten by is this WP config file. I have actually before I get into a brand new site, I duplicate that file, I start editing the file, and next thing you know, I have a file sitting on the, I used to have a file sitting there that was called wp-config.original or wp-config.org, right? Wow, those things, that's easy attack vectors for bots. It ends up that bots look for that kind of stuff. I won't make that mistake again. Hiding a WordPress version, not necessarily going to get you that far, but it doesn't hurt if you're trying to get the next step there. Again, these are just things that are kind of like getting a little bit further, trying to refine you. Hiding a WordPress version is quite often useful if there is a WordPress security urgent fix and you are not able to deploy it quickly to a live site. Having that version hidden will actually keep a lot of the bots guessing as to what version of WordPress you're using. However, the good ones, the good bots, that's a terrible word, good bots. The ones that are out there can actually figure out ways around that to find out if you're problematic or not. So, all right, getting tougher, 301. I hope this is good. I hope people are getting something here. I think this goes up to 601, by the way, if we have the time.
I don't see any questions yet.
All right.
Anyone? All right.
It's a big filtration system. That's what it is. People ask me all the time, what's a firewall? What are you going to do with a firewall? It's just like, it's just something that sifts data and categorizes incoming and quite often outgoing internet traffic based on a set of rules. Think of it as a traffic cop if you are not familiar with it. And you know, it's something that's just going to be sitting in between a big filtration system. And it's important to recognize that firewalls are kind of like layers of an onion. They're layered. There's different things you have to peel off. It can happen at one level versus another level. Then there's web application firewall. It's just, boy, this is where security starts getting a little hairy here. So there are firewalls before WordPress, and then the next slide we'll talk about firewalls that are within WordPress, or just before it. So firewalls that are before WordPress are quite often at the big boys, at the Amazons. They actually have hardware firewalls that are running that keep out, that filter out traffic. Infrastructure based, crazy huge. There's DNS level firewalls. I employ that regularly. Cloudflare, I adore Cloudflare, except when they go down. I think the vast majority of the internet went down recently because Cloudflare went down. Too much in one bucket, I guess, is a potential problem there. But there are other things besides Cloudflare that are out there. That's DNS level firewalls. They're actually, they provide what's called a reverse proxy, which looks like it's a content delivery network, a CDN, but actually isn't. Then at servers or at network levels, there's other firewalls that are run. Quite often you'll hear people talking about all these like IP tables and CSF and LPW, failed to ban, and mod security and 6G, and now there's a 7G from Jeff Starr and all these types of things. Those are sitting at the actual servers themselves. That is ideally where you want to try to have all of your security deployment. You ideally want to have it all at an infrastructure level, at a DNS level, and at a network or firewall level. If you can cover the vast majority of your stuff at those levels, you actually do not need to have a WordPress plugin running, with potentially the exception of a two-factor authentication and maybe something that will disable something called XML RPC. That's literally about it. You can take care of the vast majority of it. However, not the easiest thing to set up. You know, if you don't like Cloudflare, you go with Encapsula, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, I mean, this is all gibberish to me. I don't know what I'm doing here. And you know, there's a provider out there that provides 6G or mod security as two different options, and you flip one on and everything is going, hey, look at this, it's all protected. It seems like it's protected, and you turn on mod security, which is better, and all of a sudden everything's not working. You have to just know what you're doing in these cases there. So ultimate firewalls, there's other things that will actually happen. There's also web server configuration files. I think I've referred, these are like generally the modifying of htaccess files or .conf files for Nginx. That's where you restrict access at a level. This is that idea of banning or allowing IP addresses to come through. That will actually happen at the web server. htaccess files, .htaccess or .conf if you're running Nginx or your host is running Nginx. And those actually, you can actually get into with most web hosts. And then there's the firewalls that are within WordPress or just right before WordPress. They're actually taking place in your PHP, what's executing WordPress. They're technically called application layer firewalls. That's what they're referred to as. Some people call them web application firewalls. However, over time, WAFs have been a little hybrided and a little confusing. So I will just say yes, yeah, they're often referred to as web application firewalls. This is something that Wordfence, as an example, provides. Web application firewall, something that Security provides, is actually a one level up from that. They actually have the firewall on the cloud before it gets to WordPress. The nice thing about the ones that will happen right before WordPress, I think, you know, in Wordfence specifically, there's a feature that you need to manually turn on. You need to go and manually configure some files that will actually filter out WordPress stuff before it actually gets to WordPress. It'll do a lot of its filtering right beforehand. And then these WordPress specific rules are how things get played out. Wordfence, Security, WebArcs, Malcare is a very popular one. These are really popular systems that maintain updated rules for what the exploits are. Wordfence is probably the most popular one that's out there. Every 30 days, they will send you an update based on the rules that they have generated over the past 30 days for specific plugins or themes that have been exploited in some ways. Now, if you pay for their premium service, they will send you that rule set every single day. So if a plugin went south, the next day that particular site will now have be protected through a really interesting virtual patching that takes place, where hopefully it'll keep everything at bay. So hacks are not always obvious. It's not really clear to a lot of people how you know you've been hacked, especially nowadays that people can hack websites and then they just stay dormant. They just don't do anything. They just sit there and they wait for a future date and then they become active. So these are the ways that you would actually see things coming up out of nowhere. You know, quite often the most popular ones are defacements. Something changed on your website. It said terrible language. A lot of people start seeing things where all of a sudden emails, my website's sending these emails that I didn't send, and it's asking for you to buy a Viagra. How did that happen? Well, somebody got into somewhere. Could be that they got your password for your email, not necessarily your website, but there's not many things that you can know about quite often, and sometimes you don't want to find out too late. Google, I am of the belief, I think it's around 10,000 sites, between 10 and 12,000 sites that they take down per day, that they put on their deny list per day. So to give you an idea, these are not necessarily hacked sites. These can be just sites that shouldn't be out there or they don't want to have indexed. But the last thing you want to do is find out that your site has been suspended by your host, where they say, you can't be running on our server. You got to move to another server, or you've been denied by Google. This is another wonderful little slide that was provided by the Wordfence people. This one goes back to 2019, early 2019, and I believe I wouldn't be surprised if this is still correct. If you notice, the third item down says SEO spam. SEO spam is where people are putting in information into your site that's redirecting and providing enhanced information to other sites that they want to redirect you to. A little bit different than a malicious redirect. That's just like when you get to a site and all of a sudden it just dropped you over to somewhere else, or you visit your site and it looks good, and then you click on a link and all of a sudden it's in a different site in a different language. So that's the nature of it. Now, people were asking security plugins, so I don't want to deny this. We're getting on here. So the role of security plugins, and I mentioned without hesitation for me, is that if you can take care of your security before it gets to WordPress, you are way ahead of the game. A good deal of plugins, you know, I shouldn't say this. Some of them provide false hope. Like, I got the plugin in there and it's working because it keeps on telling me that I get brute force attacks. And wow, I keep on getting these notifications. And that's cool. That means it's working. Well, maybe not. Maybe it's just giving you an update. Maybe it's just notifying you that something's going on. A good plugin, when you do your evaluations, the role of a good security plugin should be future hope, not the false hope that things that happened in the past. So I'm going to flip through a couple of slides quickly here so you can hopefully look at the headings to give you a sense about what I want to touch on. Security plugins provide monitoring and reports. They do alerts and notifications. They do active security. Some of them do prevention and protection. That's the future hope stuff, right? And some of them, not all of them, do these web application firewalls. So backing up to monitoring. Monitoring is to a large extent that false hope. It's things that are, this is not exclusively false hope, but we're just logging information. We're telling you what's going on. But you know, all of a sudden you're going to get this thing saying, oh my God, file integrities have been violated. These following things have been hacking your website, and it's already now too late. This is just monitoring your aspects here. It's telling you what's going on. It's alerting you to it. Now, there are times that alerts are very, very important. You don't want these alerts to end up in your mailbox, and then even potentially worse, to have your email provider shove it into your spam box, and then you don't see these things. It doesn't make a difference if these are incursions that have happened in the past or things that you need to deal with. But I have listed here for people that are in the United States, and I think a couple of our Canadian friends here, these are actual special email addresses that you can utilize that will send an email to your phone. And you just plug it in as an email address. It says notify what email address. You plug in this email, and that email will now come to your text messages. And I do have a couple of sites that are configured that way, where they will actually send an email directly to my SMS text messages. One of them I am sick and tired of getting notified by, and then I start getting the next thing, which is notification fatigue. Over time, sometimes a lot of these alerts and notifications, they just get to you. It's like, all right, enough, and then you just don't pay attention to them. So that's when you need to start paying attention to the next step up here. What's active? They call it security hardening. These are plugins that will start telling you that, oh, look at this. This plugin hasn't been used in a long, long time. I can keep you away from these brute force repeated logins and limit the access to the logins. I think we said that there are multiple plugins that provide that two-factor authentication, even a couple of other login protections that are out there. Most notably, a CAPTCHA type of protection that happens at a login. Then, of course, the whole idea is that when you actually have a threat, these active things will do something about it. And if they do, they usually have some type of firewall capability. These firewalls, managed web application firewalls, are the ones that you will usually get notified by, because they are a WordPress plugin that we're talking about here. But they'll provide other things. They'll do the allow list and block list monitoring, deny lists. They will allow you to restrict the IP address. It's another mechanism to restrict it. But as the question came up before, can I restrict only let my own IP address in there? Preferably, you do that at the server level. You do that in an HT access for Apache or a cont file for Nginx. And this way, you're getting it before it even gets anywhere near WordPress. And if you, and all these things at the bottom there, a lot of these security plugins start providing it. So web application firewalls, these are very specific towards how cloud-oriented ones work, but do apply to a lot of the local ones. WebArcs and Wordfence, these do apply to as well. Takes the traffic, looks at what's going on, dumps the traffic that shouldn't be coming in, and sends you the good traffic. Good traffic is determined by these firewalls. They're looking at a lot of different information to try to figure this out. Sometimes that when you have a compromised plugin that they know about, that you don't know about, sometimes a lot of these plugins are compromised, and occasionally the plugins become compromised and the author does not release a new version for a few days. A lot of these systems actually provide you with this virtual patching to actually get you protected before it's publicly announced. It's one of the features that you pay for with a lot of these premium plugins. And additionally, a lot of the plugins that are out there that are premium provide you with cloud dashboards. That is where you can actually log into their website. You get this one interface that provides you, if you have multiple sites, hopefully you have at least a live site and a staging site. At the minimum, it'll actually provide you with one way to be able to look them all over. They also provide an outside view into your website. So when you visit your website and it's just not coming up, it's blank. Does that mean that that somebody hacked your website? Or is that just your internet connection? Or is that just maybe the cookies or the cache that's on your own browser? Sometimes you whip out your cell phone and you look at, hey, it's looking good on my cell phone, but not looking good on the desktop. Well, something is up there. But sometimes your site will completely go down. It will be not available. Maybe your host, maybe WordPress went south. Could be a number of reasons. These cloud dashboards will actually do a little bit of that information to you. And quite often, they'll actually tell you over time how often your site was actually up. You don't have to be using a security plugin to do these things. Manage WP, Main WP, Infinite WP. Those are all, I know actually it's WP Manager, I think. Those also provide cloud dashboards for you. So in the end, I think the question that was asked is how do you pick them? Like, oh my gosh, there's so many of them. How do you pick them? You go with what your boss said you should do. Yeah, all right. So you try to get one that has the two-factor authentication. You try to get the one that has the true firewall, and most likely those are the ones you're gonna have to pay for with the true firewalls. There are a couple of them that are out there that provide a decent true firewall that you don't have to pay for. I think Wordfence is probably the most popular of all of those. Do the research based on your own ability to know this. This is interesting because quite often people are asking me, well, what do you recommend? What do you think? Should I get this one or should I get this one? And I'm like, okay, so how often are you going to be able to check in with this? Do you want to get a notification every month, every week if something happens? Do you just want to set it and forget it? Do you not want to, how much do you want to pay? Do you want to pay per month? And that's the kind of stuff that you have to start sizing up. These things that they all have prices attached to them, and there's variant prices. I've seen it from $79 per year up to $30 per site per month. Cloudflare, just to get in the door, Cloudflare does have a free version, but if you want to get the really decent security with page rules with them, it's $20 per domain per month. And for a lot of people, if you're willing to pay $20, that is one of the, you can actually probably easily get away with, well, it depends on the nature of your site and how much traffic is getting, but you would want to put on a $20 per month Cloudflare paid account and have minimal plugins running. So, oh yeah, choosing, don't choose the 100% most complete security that they all say. We got the fanciest and bestest security plugin that's the most complete. It has every feature that no one else has. Yeah, I wouldn't buy into that. That's a lot of hype, but again, do the research, your own research. And ideally don't use multiple ones, or don't use ones that duplicate functionality. If you can help it, right? If you can help it. So free ones, this is the big thing, free, I want free. I already put up this idea for the 3 potential free two-factor authentication options. There is a plugin called Disable XML RPC. The next potential thing is that finding a plugin, if you want, that will provide you with logging and notification. Sadly, a lot of that is the false hope. And I want to give you a bad idea here. False hope, I mentioned before that, small businesses, 44 attacks per day. It's not that you're going to get 44 messages from them, but every single site is getting attacked. It's just, this is the way it is. So having the logging and notification that tells you that something was good doesn't necessarily mean that you had effective security. And the other 2 really interesting free plugins are, there's a couple of different options, but these are the 2 that I've personal experience with that will limit login attempts. It's kind of that brute force elimination that takes place at the Wordfence level. Notification and logging is easy to find. Stream, WP activity log is one. Malcare is another. Bulletproof security has been out for a long, long time, and there's a lot. So size them up. See what your friends are using. See what your support people are using. What, people who you trust. What do you hear when you go into those online help desks? All right. So How you doing there, Doug? You doing okay?
Yeah.
Are you taking notes? All right.
Which Doug are you talking to?
I was talking to you there. All right.
Okay.
What kind of questions do we have?
So another Doug, Doug Noyle has a question.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I think I could take another hour with the volley of questions I've got now. I looked through, I didn't see any other hands up. So maybe I'll see how fast I can get through these. So going way back there, you were talking about your backup of the WP config file. And I was curious, what do you think about the practice of moving the WP config file out of the normal spot, like to the root? So it's not normally.
Okay. Good question. I am very highly opinionated about this particular topic. I do not recommend moving the WordPress functionality around, even to the extent of renaming your WP login.php file. Definitely not the WP admin, moving out the WP config. These are all potential for problems. And if not an immediate problem with a theme or a plugin that is not happy about that, potential problems down the road should somebody have to inherit your site and to understand what happened. Now, there is one notable exception to that. There is a free piece of software that is out there from the people called Roots. Roots.io is their website, and they provide a framework called the Bedrock framework. And the Bedrock framework provides a much more modern approach to where WordPress should be storing its files. And my own experience with that Bedrock framework has been exceptional. I don't think, however, that it provides additional security.
Okay, so can I read into that based on your experience of GridPane that you do not condone the way they're doing it?
GridPane, 2 thumbs up, because they're doing it the right way, because on their systems, they've configured Nginx to handle that perfectly.
Gotcha. Okay.
All the stuff gets handled way beforehand. But if you start doing that on a GoDaddy or a Bluehost or even on a WP engine, it's potentially a recipe for disaster.
Okay, gotcha. Well, that's why I asked, because of the GridPane connection there. But okay, great.
Yeah. Now, GridPane, one of the most we've had this conversation before, Doug, you and I. It's one of the best and most highly optimized WordPress stacks that are out there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Can I ask another question?
You go with it.
All right. So with regards to security at the server end versus in a plugin, I'm a little bit confused when we were talking about web application firewalls, because I've always associated that with plugins. But yet on my server, I have the 6G or the ModSec WAF or whatnot. Were you hinting that you would be comfortable with using the 6G or the ModSec at the server level in lieu of plugins? Forget the second factor authentication. So as far as Wordfence, iTheme Security Pro plugins, are you saying you don't need them if you're going to use a 6G or a ModSec WAF on your server level?
I would confidently say 100%, especially if you use Cloudflare or Encapsula properly at the DNS level.
Okay.
Those two at the DNS level, combined with a 6G or a properly configured ModSec, eliminates the need for almost every single plugin. No question about it.
Okay, that was Cloudflare, or what was the other one?
Encapsula.
Okay.
It's Encapsula is it's a competitor to Cloudflare that provides similar types of functionality. Yeah.
Okay.
Reverse proxies is what those are called. That's like another server that sits between the internet and you. Oversimplifying, that's what it is.
Okay. I see another hand up. I'll leave my hand up. You can come back to me if there's time.
All right.
All right, Mike Noter.
Yeah, David, do you have more presentation? Because my questions, I can catch you another time. Is there more in your presentation? Because
Hi, Mike. Sadly, there's like another 2 hours worth. So I'm only as far as I can go, right? We're going to see how far we go. So you can always hit me up. You know how to get me, Mike.
Okay, I'll do it that way then. Thanks.
Yeah. And for anybody else that wants to reach out to me, my email address is in the lower right. Feel free to reach out to me.
Okay, Larry is next.
Yeah, I'm going to come back to the question I asked earlier, and I guess I'm kind of, I'm kind of thinking, I don't want to do a lot of this, server level stuff and all these complicated things and firewalls and all that stuff. But what I do want to is, try to reduce the brute force attacks and just kind of install a general security plugin. And there are 3 that seem to be the most popular that I've looked at before. And I'm wondering if you would choose one of them kind of for that purpose, a Wordfence, all-in-one WP Security, and iThemes, or maybe you have another one instead.
I would, of those 3, I would say Wordfence, as long as it is properly configured. One of the nicest things about Wordfence itself is there is safety in numbers. There's enough people out there who are using Wordfence that can probably help you should things go awry. And additionally, because they're installed on over 30 million websites, they are seeing a great deal of the Wordfence specific attack traffic that they know how to deal with things. The vast majority, I keep on saying vast, the craziest, largest amount of plugin vulnerabilities are found by them and Security. So Wordfence would be my choice of those 3.
Okay, all right, thanks. Appreciate it.
Okay, Alicia.
Was that a joke that you had 2 hours more of this presentation? Are you?
You should know me by now, Alicia.
Well, can you do part 2?
I can definitely do a part 2. I think the part 2 stuff will probably be much more technical.
Oh.
I'm trying to stay away from the technical stuff till later, but let's see how far we go today. You
Okay.
don't. Listen, this is being recorded, and you can always touch back. But yeah. There's other. You know what? How about this? I'll throw up a couple of slides and tease you for the next couple of stuff that we can talk about. Okay, there's a couple of things I can skip. Like image security. How about that?
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah. And these are like security things that people aren't thinking about quite often. Yeah, somebody get a screenshot quick so I can move on. By the way, copyright and copyleft notices. Copyright notices, people know what are. Copylefts are things like Creative Commons. This is, you are allowed to use this image, but you cannot use it for commercial purposes. This image you are allowed to use, but you cannot change that image. This image you can use, but you have to give me permission. Give credit to who did it. I work with a number of photographer sites, and these are the requests, and it's interesting how security comes up for them as well. Another thing that I may not spend a lot of time on is the whole social. Boy, I feel like now I'm going to breeze through this here, Alicia. Social engineering. This is the way that you get in. It's if you're targeted. How about this? It's one thing to have botnets and spray attacks and brute force attacks is one thing, but if somebody really wants to get in to whatever it is, they want to get into your bank accounts, let alone your website, this is the way to go about doing it. It is people just sharing too much information out there. Just on social media, people can find out so much about you. They can give a call in. They do, very, very specific things that are like very specific to you, spear phishing, that just seem to, listen, you know what? Don't open up emails. I'm saying this all the time to people around me. If it looks like, if it's in the spam folder, if you didn't request it, it may look good. Don't open it. Don't open up attachments. How long have we been hearing this for? Use good antivirus software on your local computer. And for years and years and years, people would say, you don't need antivirus on the Macintosh. You need antivirus software on a Macintosh. You do. You need something good on a Windows machine. You need something good on Linux machines. There's something called Maldet, ClamAV. You need respectable antivirus to help out with these social engineering things as well. So yeah. Social engineering, by the way, also is ransomware. There's this aspect to it of you know, you do a backup to an external drive, you leave it connected to your computer. Next thing you know, you get the phone call for somebody saying, I have your keys, and you're not even going to get into your external drive. There is software that's out there, backup software, that will prevent that from being locked out. I want to make some antivirus recommendations briefly. On Windows and on Macintosh, there is a software called Cylance. Cylance, Cylance. Unbelievably inexpensive for consumers, unbelievably expensive for businesses. It stops attacks dead stop on that. And as far as backup software, just disconnect your external drive after you're done backing it up. I leave them plugged in on my Windows computers on two of my servers, and I use something that is called Macrium, M-A-C-R-I-U-M, Macrium, and that actually protects my external drive so that no one would be able to get me from ransomware. All right, so clients. I think a number of people here have clients that they're doing sites for others. And there are certain things that you can do to save them from themselves. You know, stopping them from uploading plugins is one thing, but that sometimes if you don't do it the right way, you're actually stopping the updates that can come through for the plugins or for the themes. The other thing that I find that really gets to me with my clients is that I inherit websites from other people that need fixing sometimes, and there's no documentation for what came before. And you know, just do yourself the courtesy of documenting for yourself changes you made, but also for people down the road. And you can use these other things for monitoring it. So let's see, that was 303, 304. Woo, going up there. Okay, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these things. Other security things. I want to touch on this one that's on the second one down on the left. Oh, wait. Trust signals, by the way, are showing your users that your site is secure. A lot of e-commerce sites will say protected by Symantec. This site is using a little icon. This site is using SSL protection. This site has been certified as being PCI compliant. Those are trust signals that are actually just as important as the security themselves to have people know that you're legit. But that second one down, that e-commerce security, if you accept payment cards, credit cards, or Venmo, or PayPal, or these types of systems, you need to be compliant to what is called PCI DSS. A lot of people don't think about that in terms of WordPress security, but you need to do a lot of practices to make sure that credit cards that you see are being stored properly, and that you do not save or store those little CVV2, you know, those extra 3 digits or 4 digits on American Express cards. Another big security consideration that I want to say out loud is that second one down on the right is quite often there are people in our lives that really don't know what security means and how much they need to pay attention to it. And then what do you don't talk to strangers is what you say to the 3-year-old was there as they're beginning to understand that concept. But now later on, don't put up the TikTok videos, right? You know, like, so those are also other security concerns that I want to make sure that I got a chance to at least spit out, because I think that those are potentially doozies, you know? All right.
Okay, Doug Ryder.
Hey, David. Just a quick question regarding e-commerce. You mentioned that not storing credit cards on a website, which I absolutely 100% agree with. And so why would anyone do that? Because there are payment gateways that could handle the PCI compliance.
So the vast majority of modern software does not store that data, but
Right.
there's a lot of applications that have been used in the past. I'd say even things going back only 4 years old that do store that data. And sometimes people just are using these things. I wouldn't even call them legacy systems, but they're out there being used. But that portion also, there are people who you give me a phone call and you say, "Hey, David, I want to pay this bill for you here," and I take your credit card and then I type it into a form, right? And that form is ending up on the website, and I put it into my CRM, right, where your name and your contact is, and right off the bat, I've now violated that PCI compliance. So
it's bad practice. I mean,
it's just a bad practice.
Yeah, just tokenize it like all major payment gateways do nowadays. So, okay.
But again, a lot of it comes down to just the individual saying, "Oh, I'll just throw it into a form," right?
Yeah.
Oh, I'll email it to you. How about that one? I'll just email you my credit card.
Yeah, I've had that.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
All right. You ready for the brain to hurt?
Bring it on.
All right. Moving on here. This has a lot of info. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. And to a large extent, I'm not going to spend a lot of time because I think it's talking to a narrower group as we're moving on. I'll touch on only a few of these things. I do want to point out that almost every single thing that you're going to see in these next 3 slides are available for you to do or for your web host to do for you. They just take a little bit of effort in some cases, and some cases they take a little bit of monumental effort to do. Strong passwords, there's a way to enforce that. If you have a commerce site, that thing called Password Apology Manager, they just got hacked a few weeks ago. Themselves. They're like the worst kind of hacked, an elevated privilege hack that they had. But they've corrected it. They actually corrected it before it was publicly announced. These are things that will make sure that people have to have a certain length in their password. They can't reuse the passwords. It keeps history. It has to use special characters. It has to be over 12 characters long. Those types of things are actually really, really useful, especially on commerce sites. This thing here about PHP versions, the latest PHP version, which is 7.4, which is actually what now the WordPress site health dashboard will actually say you should be using, does not work, does not play well. Well, I should say a lot of plugins do not play well with it. Right now, I would recommend somebody using a 7.3 variant. I think right now they're up to 7.3.9 as of a few weeks ago. This idea of aggressively limiting IP access is that actually you can lock out traffic ranges from large swaths of geographic regions. Something that you can actually do without that much difficulty with a lot of hosts. You can do it easily with Cloudflare, and I think even WordPress has some functionality about that. For those who don't know, Amazon Deep Glacier is a place to store backups that costs you obscene pennies. It's unbelievable how cheap it is to store on an Amazon Deep Glacier account. Unbelievable. The downside is you pay a lot of money to get it out. It's kind of like this safe deposit box approach, or even a physical safe deposit box, right? And you know, this webmaster tools at the bottom here, Google has one called Google Search Console. Bing has one called Webmaster Tools. It's actually kind of shocking how simple this stuff is. That will, I mean, you leverage their infrastructure to tell you the health of your website. low-hanging fruit for that kind of stuff. But one of the things, you know, Doug brought up here, this idea of changing the changing my WP config file. A lot of people, if it's even like iTheme security, will, on one of our features, we're going to change your WordPress database prefix, and we're going to help you. A lot of these things are called security through obscurity. And I'll tell you, as a security professional, obscuring security is not adding security. It adds complexity, not security. And the large reason of that is all these bots that are out there know how to accommodate for it. They just do. Email security is also something that should be considered at this level. There are a number of plugins that you type in your SMTP information. That's your SMTP is outgoing authentication for emails. You put this into you just type it in, and it stores it in plain text in a database in WordPress. And then if your site gets hacked, that means that your email can now be hacked. And now it's this falling, you know, like this little cascading effect here. So I feel like we're on a roller coaster. We're getting faster and faster here.
Okay, we got a couple questions. Alicia?
Hi, okay, so this kind of goes back to the storing of the credit cards. Now, this is an unusual situation that a client I might be taking on. They've got 25 years of client information on a FileMaker on their local machine. They have 11,000 clients. Everything they've ever bought through their website, which is 15 years old, which is why we're working on it. It's not even responsive. The plugins, it's just waiting, a ticking time bomb. One of the things that I thought was really peculiar, though, is it's massage therapists, and they're like really not tech savvy. So some of them like this like hard copy or email thing. So when people sign up for one of their workshops, you can do it online, or there's a PDF flyer or brochure that they download, and then they fill it out with their credit card number and everything, and either put it in the actual mail or email it back. So that, where are we going with that? That seems to me a little bit not safe.
Yeah, and you know, you'd be shocked by how popular that is. It's shocking.
I need you to tell me some shocking words that I can relate back.
Shocking words to relate back. I think, you know, there's two. So one thing is that you can potentially say to them that if we ever get reviewed or audited by our credit card company, they are going to shut us down without any type of recourse. We will then have to seek another credit card provider. That's one thing. I think there's a scare tactic towards that, but that's just the truth. It's just the truth. You know, actually, I don't know if you ever looked at the PCI compliance for online stuff. It's a doozy of a list. Technically, from a lot of these companies, when you go to paper without electronic, you're under a different set of circumstances.
Okay.
You're not under the PCI DSS standards, which are digital standards, but it can be argued if they downloaded the form, it was an implied thing.
It actually says, like, there's an option, a button. There's a button that says download this form. It's like encouraged on the site.
You know, the other thing you can do is ask them to show, you know, ask them to bring out their merchant card agreement that they got, you know, that stuff that's in 3-point type, and show you where in there it says that's okay. You know what I'm talking about, those huge documents that are like you can hardly read, because it's in there. Show me where this is okay. I don't know.
So is there a way, so you don't know offhand how that violates the is it PPI? Is that what it is? At what point, like, what is one more glaringly obvious things in the whole, you know, process that I told you where it was all of it?
I believe, listen, it also depends on how bad does the credit card company want to go after them, right? You know, if it's the Grange that is out in Lewis County, Washington, where they're just getting together for pancake breakfasts, they're not going to get, the company, the credit card companies are going to go after the big fish. You know what I mean?
Okay. Yeah, I
So,
don't think that'll be.
yeah.
But it's just, I should, like, when we redo the site, I should encourage them not to continue that. I don't know if I'm going to be able to convince them, but at least I won't be.
Yeah, ask them to write out their best practices for how they're going to ensure that that eventually gets shredded.
Yeah. Okay. That's a good one.
Potentially have them have a little thing on their website saying how we're going to protect your credit card once we receive it.
Yeah.
But it depends how tech, whatever.
Okay.
All right.
Doug Noyle.
Okay, I got a quick one. So if topic is the website mailing out information. So if we're holding DKIM and SPF records in our SMTP plugins, which is probably what everybody's doing to not have to be subject to the standard PHP mailing stuff in a WordPress site, right? So we want successful emails coming out of our site, notifying us of what's going on. What are the alternatives? If that's bad, what do you suggest?
So, all right, I'm going to give you a little bit of a longer answer here. And hopefully, I'm not going to go that long. So you can generically safely store SMTP information in both functions.php or your own plugin, a custom-made plugin, as well as the WP config. Assuming that your files don't get exposed, that information is harder to get to than the database itself. That's number one. Number two is there are a number of plugins that are out there that actually don't have your password in plain text. They very specifically don't have it that way. There's another one that is another approach is to use a third-party provider for email. Some people use MailGrid or SendGrid, especially for higher volume sites, and those particular providers give you an API connection and don't expose the username or password, and you can cut that down. You can cut that API at its knees when you need to. That doesn't expose a lot. And if you use Amazon, something called SES on Amazon, which is what I use for most of my stuff, they have what are called IAMs, where you can also very specifically limit it, and you put that information into the WP config. But I use a plugin for that, actually. I use something from Delicious Brains. Holy crap, that was a weird answer. I hope you got that.
Yes, thank you.
All right. Yeah, and the other thing, by the way, for people that use MailPoet, MailPoet uses their servers for sending out emails if you use their service. So that's another mechanism potentially. MailPoet's usually primarily used for newsletter or blog post emails, but you can use it for transactional emails, and it'll go through their servers without you having to put in any of that information.
Cool, thank you.
All right, we're at 8:03, and I'm going to tell you what we're going to go through next time. All right, when we have another presentation. I will touch on what to do if you're hacked, the steps to actually take. And it's actually only one step, by the way. It's hire a professional. No, there are things that you can do, but it's better to have somebody else handle it. I will also, in a future thing, I'll get into the really advanced stuff. This stuff goes on. There's a lot. I talked about user enumeration, and there's other things that I promise you in the future I will cover. I just don't want to keep people going past what we said we were going to go past here. But there are things you can do. And now let's bring up this here. Things to jot down, things to pay attention to. This is where I should end it here. I'll end it with leaving up this slide and answering some last hanger-on questions. These are some great things to pay attention to. If you were overwhelmed or didn't understand some of these things I brought up, that security glossary at WP White Security, and they, by the way, they have their own plugin. It's one of the best security glossaries that are out there for explaining all this stuff. And a couple of blogs that are out there. Think Like a Hacker podcast is done by the Wordfence people. It is done once a week by them. It's usually fascinating if you're a WordPress person. All right, guys. Thank you, thank you, thank you.